The gist currently is the tax reform. Firstly, I had to ask myself, where did this tax thing come from? The first thing I saw was the social contract theory. So the social contract theory is a thought that how a society works is that the citizens sacrifice part of their absolute freedom and part of their income to a central authority. A central authority has to protect and maintain order and some other things that the government of a country that works actually does. So that is the basis of taxation. President of the Committee on the Tax Reform, Mr. Tony-Igwe, says the psychological effect of the uninformed is the real danger of the tax reform, and that hit me and that made me go and want to read up on the tax reform. These were the things I was able to dig up on it. So all of these things that we are seeing in the tax reform were signed into law in 26 June 2025. There were 4 acts. So we have the Nigeria Tax Act, which provides for basically the what and the who and the how much. Then we have the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, which just oversees the enforcing of these laws, procedures for enforcing them. We also have the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Act. Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Act. Why the Nigerian Revenue? The Act establishes the Nigerian Revenue Service. So what is revolutionary about this is that before they had the FIRS, that's Federal Inland Revenue Service for federal level, and the SIRS for the state level. FIRS used to collect just tax revenue, but now the NRS would collect tax and non-tax revenue. Non-tax revenue like custom, levies, penalties, royalties, so that they would get more money into the coffers of the government. The NRS Establishment Act abolishes FIRS and establishes NRS. We now have the Joint Revenue Board Establishment Act. So this is just like the peacekeepers, like the ombudsman. It will keep data, it will make sure there is no double taxation standing between the NRS and SIRS. That's just what this JRB is about. So we have the VAT. The tax reform is establishing zero-rated goods, which is different from exempted. VAT means value-added tax, and it's basically tax imposed when you purchase a good or a service. As the name implies, value-added, every time value is added. What a VAT zero-rated good means is that for that good, it's not just that the final consumers don't pay VAT on it. The producers also get VAT returns. So the things that would have incurred VAT to them, they would not pay that VAT. What they would do is they will file it and get the returns back. Let me distinguish between exempted and zero-rated good in terms of VAT. If bread is an exempted good, the final consumer, me, because I love bread, I would not pay VAT on bread. But then indirectly, I would be paying VAT on bread because when the people producing the bread buy fuel, airtime and so on in making the bread, they're going to pay VAT because all those things are goods and services. They're going to bundle up that cost into the final price of the bread, so I end up paying for that VAT. When we have zero rated, I'm not going to pay, and they that are producing would then file their taxes and say we paid VAT in this, and later on they're going to relieve them so they get their money back, so they don't pay VAT. So this tax reform made essential zero rated. Argument is that their prices should go down, but if anybody with a basic knowledge in economics knows that prices are downward sticky, so what is the guarantee that those people producing, because their cost is lower, they're going to reduce the prices? And bro, we're in Nigeria, for goodness sake, they're just going to lock up. So do you have policies in place for the people in the market to actually push forward that thing that you intended for? The personal income tax. We saw the release of the new threshold. If you're earning less than or equal to 800k, pay 0% tax. Yeah. For the next 2.2 million, you pay 15% tax, and progression just like that. The poor pay nothing, the middle class pay less, and then the higher class pay more. This progression got me questioning who exactly falls into that bracket of less than or equal to 800k. So the average monthly income of a Nigerian, according to remoteworker.com, is 339,000 naira, which is very realistic because if you account for the cost of living, if the children are going to school, if they're getting the bare minimum and they're eating rice, that should be the average amount. If you calculate that, you'd see that the income of the basic household falls above that 0% threshold. The next thing is the company income tax threshold. If you are earning less than or equal to 100 million annually, and then if your total fixed asset is also less than or equal to 250 million naira, you are a small company and you pay 0 company income tax, no development levy. If you are above the 100 million threshold, then you're now a large company. But that just made me wonder, is that supposed to help things? You have that thing on your neck as a small company. Do not aim for above 100 million naira annually. Another policy of this tax reform is the rent relief. So before, we had the consolidated relief allowance, that they just put all these allowances they used to have, like housing allowance, and they just pulled it together and they used to deduct it from your salary. But then now they got the rent relief allowance, which is 20% of your rent, capped at 500k. Reason that the highest thing that Nigerians pay is rent. But then to get the rent relief, you'd have to submit some documents, and these documents definitely have the details of your landlord, because you're supposed to pay a withholding tax of about 10%. No landlord is going to allow you to pay 10% withholding tax for them. So a lot of landlords evaded taxes. So I think this rent relief now would capture them into the net. It gets me worried because the landlords are going to get taxed more. By definition, your rent is expected to increase if my logic is right. At the end of the day, is the rent relief a win or a lose? The plot, the intention, my guess is to gather people more into the tax net. From the threshold in the personal income tax, the threshold in the company income tax, the rent relief, the VAT refund, I think it's like a Trojan horse. Is a good deal, but like when you unpack it and you start to see the intricacies, you start to ask yourself, is this really a good deal? If the average monthly salary of a Nigerian that is living a normal life is 339,000, according to my math here, annual income is average of 4 million naira. Of course, they don't fall into the 0% tax bracket. The government is now able to capture them, and let's say you're earning the minimum wage, and the only way you made up that extra to 339,000 is by side hustles. Now, when you register, they're going to be able to identify that your side hustle and tax it. So that's the issue. We're now wondering if registering is a win for us. You want to tax income to increase productivity in these hard times. It's kind of like filling a basket that already has a hole in it. You want to increase the government revenue, but then the revenue already existing there, where is it? It's going away, but you still want to fill it up. It's a bit of a concern to the Nigerian people. I think their aim is for everybody to get registered, to get a tax ID. You even got to a point that they were like, don't even register, we'll use the NIN. This tax ID will be linked to your account. Everything would be unified. So no matter all the things you have at hand, they have the data to go back and let it point back to you. And now this is where the whole narration thing everybody's talking about in WhatsApp comes into play. New tax reform would basically be assisted by transactions instead of taxing your bank account. They're going to identify you, and what they would use is a tax ID. For an individual, it's now your NIN, and for a business, it's your CAC RC number, which typically has your NIN in the background. As a business owner, no matter how many businesses you own, all of them still point back to you as a taxpayer because of your NIN. So, but then they're taxing you based on your income and not your inflow. So the misconception that any money that enters your account, bam, they will tax you is wrong, and they would require you to self-assess yourself. Your transactions and your record, they don't tax it immediately. It's actually used for cross-checking. Just kind of check if what you declared is consistent with your lifestyle, the financial activity in your account. When you now narrate, you can now say that this is my income, this is a gift, this is a this is a that. Then the law allows them to also flag accounts. So there are particular thresholds that if you put in your account as an individual and as a business, you get flagged. They would notice that, okay, this is not consistent with the kind of taxpayer this is. But then there's not a problem when you do not file your taxes, or you file the wrong thing, or you refuse to comply. They now move to best of judgment assessment. Is when they use available information to kind of like guess how much you should pay in tax. That's the one people are screaming about. Best of judgment assessment is they would look at the activity, consistency of this and lifestyle, and then ascertain your tax. So you now have the right to object. After a while, when there is continued non-compliance, then penalties. I think the penalties, everybody needs to look at the penalties. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to go and get data, but then the people that are taking our data, are they trustworthy? Do they have proven records to utilize our data for something good? That is the question, and that is why every Nigerian is afraid. So the Gazette drama just kind of consolidates all of our fears. This same talk about tax reform, we are now hearing that what they signed in National Assembly is different from what we saw, and it's not different in a good way. That just reinforces the cynicism that almost every Nigerian has. A lot of people don't trust the government, and this tax reform, the only way to pull it off is trust. Many people need to trust that this money that you're taking from them, you're going to use it to make their lives better, and the tax reform is for them and not against them. So although the tax reform reform has its benefits in a way. I think if you look at it critically, many people's skepticism is not unbacked. The Nigerian government has questions the elephant in the room of accountability. Thank you for listening to me rant about taxes, and I hope you're able to learn one or two. If there is also anything you have to say about the topic, feel free to speak up, my bro. Bye.